Welcome to the Write Good Books podcast, the audio companion to WriteGoodBooks.com, with your host Jason Bougger.
And welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jason, joined by our co-host Scott Michael Childers. How are you doing?
I am doing fine.
Doing fine. I'm doing fine too. It's a good day.
Yes.
It's not snowing yet, and that is always good.
Well, as we record this, it might be snowing wherever you, dear listener, are listening.
That's true. You could be in the mountains of
Mountainville.
There you go. That was original.
That was dumb.
Well, speaking of original, when I'm looking through early drafts of my work, of my stuff, or works in progress, I guess, more than stuff that's already done. And it always comes back to the same problem for me. My characters always seem like they're the same person to me when I'm writing an early draft. I'm like, it's so hard to tell who's talking if you don't have a whole bunch of dialogue tags. And I don't like to surround everything with dialogue tags. You can only say said so many times. So I thought it'd be a good idea to talk a little bit about how to fix that so that your characters don't all seem the same and run together, how to differentiate who's who, and help make your characters more unique. So, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we talked a little bit about this clear back on episode 2 when we were talking about creating effective dialogue. So if you haven't listened to that already, go back, check that out too. We talked about it just a little bit, but today we're going to talk specifically about separating your characters from each other.
In episode 2, we were just a couple of kids back then.
Yeah, that was way back yonder. And there you have an example. Jason would probably never say way back yonder. Me, I say all sorts of stupid stuff if you're a longtime listener of the show.
There you go.
So these are some quirks that you could introduce into dialogue to help differentiate your characters. The types of phrases they use, the cadence of their sentences. You know, when I start opening my mouth, it's going to be kind of long and somewhat whining. Man, with some weird pauses like William Shatner. So there's the cadence, there's the phrasing. Jason, you have anything to throw in with dialogue?
You just compared yourself to William Shatner.
I'll compare myself to all sorts of people at the end of the day, apparently.
Awesome. No, I think there's some points. We kind of jotted this down beforehand. You can look at how your characters talk. You can look at the choices they make. You can look at their motivations, their physical appearance, and their cultural background. Yeah,
so let's dive into some of these. So we talked about dialogue as well. But their actions speak just as loud as the dialogue. And what we talked with action, some things it's going to be general. You know, people go upstairs. But are you describing how they're walking? Do they walk with a fast pace? Do they walk with a limp? When they raise their hands, is it a welcoming gesture or is it a threatening gesture? You know, what kind of body language are you describing when you are doing your action pieces?
Yeah, you know, and you'll know people like this in real life. Some people speed walk everywhere they go. Other people walk so slow you wonder if they're actually walking backwards.
And then we talked about choices. And that comes from motivation. Well, I'll get into motivation a little bit later because I've got a bunch to say on that. But, you know, the choices that they make, even in some everyday actions. Like if you're describing some teenagers going through a lunch line, are you describing, you know, Bobby is picking up that mystery meat platter that looks reminiscent of last week's mystery meat platter, whereas Joe, he's picking up the salad, which was unusual for him because normally Joe also gets the mystery meat platter. You know, they're doing different things.
Right, you might have the chatty one, or you might have the one who stares at their phone.
Yes.
And there'll be bigger choices too. You know, some characters would run from conflict, other ones might go right at it and try to defeat it.
Right. And so I think all of these type of things come from the character's motivations. And I've heard it said that characters drive plot. And depending if you're an outliner or someone who's a discovery writer, you may come about this differently. But each of at least your main characters, protagonist, antagonist, accomplice, those various big roles, give them all some sort of motivation. And you can do that fairly broadly by saying what's one thing they love and one thing they hate. And then when they're making decisions, you have that in mind. When they're talking about things, a person who hates, let's say someone hates popular culture, for some reason, they are not going to use colloquialisms like, something that they heard off of last night's Saturday Night Live. Because they hate popular culture, they're not going to talk that way. The other person loves comedy. They may also not do Saturday Night Live, because some people argue if that's comedy or not.
I would be one of those.
See, there we go. So the internal motivations can help you come up with how are they making those choices, how are they dressed, how are they talking. So use that and create motivations for each one of your major ones, even if you're not going to actually put that in the book or story you're writing.
Right, so you're bringing up character profiles now.
Exactly.
And this, I used to not really do this, but once I started doing this, it really helps. And there's so many examples you can find online, but you basically have a little sheet, a little Word document, or whatever you want to use, and here's my character, do some physical traits, but then also do, what do they love, what do they hate, what are they afraid of, what are their goals, who do they love, who do they hate, what are their hobbies, what's their speaking pattern like, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and probably some characters you don't need to flesh out a lot because they're quote-unquote on screen for 5 minutes.
Though, giving them that background, you never know when you might want to use them later.
That is true.
So you might not initially plan to need that kind of information about a character, but you never know. I've done it for some really minor characters, and it just helped the way they react in a certain scene, even if it's the only scene they were in.
And it also helps keep that continuity. And it depending if which character it is, where they're growing.
Oh, yeah. Because growth is just as important as consistency with characters.
Right, but it's a noticeable growth in those cases. You can see where they came from and where they ended up. And some writers, they will put a growth, character growth
Character arc. Yeah.
Character arc, thank you, in their character sketches.
And if you're an outliner and not a discovery writer, I think you can have a lot of fun doing a character arc for every major character. I think if you write something, a large-scale series, you almost have to do that, but maybe not.
Yeah.
It's worth a try.
So, and you never know. The market out there, if you happen to get a really successful book, and you can write a spin-off, I can't think of a better term, but a novella with some of the backup characters, and what were they doing during this time?
Right.
And it all nicely ties together.
Sure. Well, sequels and prequels as well.
Yeah. Write your Jar Jar Binks fan fiction. No, don't.
Just don't show it to me.
Yeah, don't show it to either one of us. No, I'm just kidding. Either way, outlining or discovery writing, having a good sense of where your characters, at least where they start out from, is going to help you be able to create individuals as opposed to token girl on the party, token, wizard,
Right.
They're more than just names.
Yeah, and they're more than just props. One problem I have with this, you want to have different types of characters. I had a novel on the first draft that I pretty much ditched for now because it was like I had 4 main characters and they each had one trait that defined them, and I hate that. And it was so bad that I need to rewrite the book almost entirely. I had the funny kid, it had the fat kid, it had the athlete kid, it had the serious kid, it had the stoner kid.
So they were all stereotypes or one-dimensional.
Right, they were defined by their one dimension, and that you definitely need to avoid. And that when you bring in cultural and ethnic backgrounds,
oh, definitely.
Yeah, you don't want to see that happen too.
So some other things to help you as you're going through the writing. So you've done the character sketches, at least to begin with. And those could change as you're writing. For me, especially as a discovery writer, the characters end up taking me places. And so I update my character sketch. Here's where they grow. But when you're doing the physical descriptions of your characters, and in some cases, working with their dialogue, you may want to have some sort of physical reminder of what they look like. So either a photo or a sketch. So I know, for example, for many of the scenes I write, I have movie running in my head, and all I'm doing is reporting what I'm seeing in that movie in my head. The description of the action, the way they're moving, the way they're talking, how their voices sound. Some people don't visualize like that. They have other methods. They create that scene with their writing. They're not like me where I'm reporting what I'm envisioning. They are writing what they want to see. They're doing it the opposite way. They're using the writing to create the picture. I'm creating the picture, and then I'm trying to describe it as best I can with the writing. Either way, going back to those character sketches, going back to reference photos, sound models, if you could hear interviews of people, like of dialects, I think those are all great resources. Right? So I guess one of the things we're trying to say is people can be from a rather homogenous society, and they can still be individuals if you take the time to give these people some background.
Right. And it's really not that hard. I mean, if you just think of your circle of friends, if you have friends.
Oh, ouch.
We're
ouch.
writers, we're not social people.
Ouch, pain, agony.
No, think about your circle of acquaintances. Think about what makes all of your friends different. You know, this guy likes to watch football. He bases his entire fall social life around who's playing who on what days, and then your other friend does the same thing with baseball, and all you want to do is watch a movie. You know, you've got 3 different possibilities of character traits you can add right there. It's pretty easy to come up with differences as long as they seem realistic.
Yeah. And what you just described, Jason, was they can be fairly homogenous other than that. But still, you know, you're going to say, oh, you know, why you got to drag us out to this movie? You know, I got a Wolves game here. And yes, I know there's no baseball, or I'm choosing generic terms for sports teams. We don't want to get sued. I got a Wolves game here at 3 o'clock. Come on, is the movie going to be done by then? Right? Dragging me out to go see this.
There, you can even add a little bit of friendly conflict.
Watching this French cinema thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, you know, your characters are real people in the world you created, so they need to have realistic likes and dislikes.
And then you could also throw in those cultural touchstones in the sketches, too, so...
Yeah. You know, one thing that I often struggle with is physical appearance, not so much from the writing point of view, but from, I guess not so much from the philosophical point of view, but more like from the actual physical writing. How do you say, this character has blonde hair without saying, this character has blonde hair? You know, you don't want to be real telly with the traits you throw in. You still want to show them. And that can be difficult, especially if you're coming up with these physical traits simply to differentiate between your characters.
Yeah, and those type of things, I mean, some of them you discover, the reader will discover as you go along. Some of them are not important.
Yeah.
Some of them are used in how other people react to seeing that person.
There you go. And I think most of the times physical traits don't matter. Small details don't matter.
There are some pieces of literature where you have no clue about the protagonist or antagonist.
And I prefer that as a reader.
Yeah. And not even gender roles or physical descriptions at all. It's all about how they're reacting, and there are no clues to the physical, which maybe that's the direction you want to take your piece. Some people do it as a statement. Some people just do it because like you say, it's not a meaningful thing.
It's like, you know, sometimes I'll criticize Stephen King, but I still love him. And one of the things he said, you know, he tries to limit the physical descriptions because he wants the reader to create the character in their head.
Yeah.
So, but if you need enough of his physical appearance description to make sure that the reader can have a different vision in their head, I guess.
Yeah. Or even just the attitudes that are portrayed.
Yeah.
They could be featureless humanoids, but if one is described as slouching, the other is to be described as the back was ramrod straight. There's no other features in those descriptions, and yet you probably have an idea how those two are different.
Yeah, you can get your attitude from posture pretty quickly.
Yeah. So have we let our differences come between us at the end of this podcast?
Yes, we have.
All right.
I think differences are important. They're what make us human, and they're what make your characters realistic.
Yeah,
I say with a smiley face.
Well, and sometimes there's your part of your conflict.
Yes, more often than not, for better or worse.
And for another podcast episode.
Yeah. So thanks again for listening. And I guess this is probably our Happy New Year's edition. So have a great 2017 and check us out on the web at www.writegoodbooks.com/podcast. See you next time.
Happy New Year, and I want a hippopotamus for Christmas.
Yay! Bye.